So as you know, winter starts in December, I think around December 21st. I looked it up, but I already forgot. And the government just told us that we won't be able to heat our home this winter. So I want to give you a little bit of background what we're doing here, how we came to this. And we heat our little tiny house, which is just a little bit bigger than a bedroom. It's 200 square feet is what it is. It's 16 feet long, 12 feet wide, just under 12 feet wide. Well, I built it 2 years ago. It's got 6 inches of insulation. I put 2x6s in the walls instead of 2x4s. And so it holds the heat really well. And I went around with caulk gun or silicone gun and siliconed every crack in the house. The only crack we have in the house now, the only air is coming through the door. The nice thing is that the door is on the south side of the house, so all the wind usually comes from the north side. And then we heat our house with this wood stove. And this is a really efficient wood stove. I've told you all about it before. As a matter of fact, I'll put an up next box at the end of this video. It'll be right here, pop right up on the screen. That tells you all about this wood stove, how it operates. But this one's really efficient. It's 85% efficient. Installed it myself. If you have any skills, you probably can do this. There's a lot of videos on the internet, on YouTube, on how to install them. I think the hardest thing to do is just to try to get the hole through the ceiling and the roof and everything to line up. You got to use a line, a string with a weight on it. You can use a chalk line to do the same thing, to get that chimney to line up just perfectly. But it wasn't that hard. I was scared to death to do it, but I managed and I didn't make any mistakes. We bought this one off Facebook Marketplace. It was used and we got it like dirt cheap. I think it was $450 and it had only been used twice. It was quite obvious it had only been used twice. The guy even put it back in the original crate that he bought it in. It came from Home Depot. Now this one is obsolete. You can't buy this one anymore. It's Wood Pro. But you can get similar stoves like this at Home Depot. Now they're pretty expensive, $2,200, $2,400. But like I said, you can buy them all the time on Facebook Marketplace. Now this one's 85% efficient. If I haven't said it, that's what it is. That means that it's using almost all the energy that's being produced from the firewood. It's got these reburners, air tubes up here at the top. And so if I turn down the flame will die down and then you'll start to see blue dancing flames. What it is that smoke is starting to burn. The smoke comes up, hits that reburner, and flashes off into blue flames. You can't see it on camera. It's very disappointing. I mean, I got a pretty nice camera too, so it should pick up those colors, but it doesn't. Probably some sort of infrared thing is my guess. We've stopped putting the vent in. We leave it out the whole time. I've learned a lot. You got to use dry firewood. Dry firewood, 20% or less. We have a moisture tester. Actually, I have 2 of them. And you just split the log, and then you put that 2 probes of the moisture tester right into the center of the log, and it tells you what the moisture content is in it. And I test every piece of wood that comes in here. Since we live in such a small house, I don't need a lot of firewood in here because it just gets way too hot. So I've learned that I've got to really keep the logs very small. This one could actually probably be split again. So I could do that one again and get 2 pieces out of that. Essentially, I get about 6 pieces that size. So that's 2 pieces there. And as long as I can get the stove up to 500 degrees, I think 500 degrees is when everything starts operating well. Right up here at the top, I got one of those laser thermometers. I think it's actually infrared, but it's got a laser pointer on it. It's like an oven in the house, you know, a cook stove. And then the temperature starts to drop down right after that. Then everything's pretty perfect. Now, the thing about the stove is it's got all these insulated stones in there, like soapstone, I don't know what it is. And it holds the heat forever. So I can light it and I don't have to touch it, do anything for 8 hours. That doesn't mean there's 8 hours of flame. That means there's 8 hours of solid heat that can produce enough heat for this little house for 8 hours. So I start it when the house temperature is in the mid-60s, anywhere from 62 to 67 degrees. And it gets about 85 degrees in here. And so all day long that temperature starts dropping and dropping. One day I got to 56 degrees before I woke up and realized, it's pretty chilly in here. It's not horribly important that we start the wood stove, except I got a water tank outside. And the water tank can freeze. I got ventilation with a fan that blows the heat from inside into that water tank. So I want to keep that warm. So if the house gets too cool, then there's not enough temperature to keep that tank warm. That's why I got to try to get up in the middle of the night when the temperature's still 60s in the house. Now, as you know, probably know, they're predicting a very cold winter. It's already very cold, and it's not even winter time. It's November. It's not even Thanksgiving. We've had snow twice. It's very rare that it snows before Thanksgiving here. I've seen it happen one other time just a few years ago. We're already getting January temperatures. We're going to be down in the teens, I think, in the next couple of days. Now it's supposed to warm back up, and then it's supposed to be cold again. I've been using firewood about 3 times a day. Now that's kind of high usage for fall time. I have 15 years of firewood, meaning I have 15 cords of firewood. We use about a cord a year is what we've come up with so far. We probably will have to use a little bit more this year because it's so cold. But I suspect this January is just going to be downright frigid. I mean, they're saying that temperatures are going to be colder for the next few years because of this solar something or another. And it doesn't really matter. I'm not a meteorologist, but they're saying it's supposed to be colder. I mean, how can you trust the weatherman? They're never right. But right now they're right. It's cold. So the government just came out. One of the regulatory agencies, they didn't say which one. It was in Bloomberg's news. There's only like 7 of them. I mean, OSHA, EPA, CDC, I don't know, but there's like 7 of them. And they said that there is going to be a limitation on electricity this year. They expect power outages in the middle of winter. A lot of people heat their homes with electric. They're also saying shortages with natural gas and fuel oil. I don't know, from Texas to Louisiana over to North Carolinas and, you know, the whole East Coast, Chicago, Illinois, can expect power outages this year. They just don't have enough fuel oil, natural gas and coal and all this stuff to keep the electric running. Well, if you heat with natural gas, you also got to remember your furnace uses electricity to spin that fan, that blower. So you got to think about all these things. So that means there's going to be a lot of people without power this year. They're also saying that 25% of homes in the United States is behind on their utility bills. In here in Missouri, I don't think they can shut off your electric during the wintertime, but I don't know if that's everywhere. So if they're shutting off your electric because you're behind on your utility bills in the middle of winter, it's going to be a real struggle. And if they're shutting it off because they just don't have enough energy. Now, we saw this a few times in the last couple of years, primarily in the southwest area, like Texas and Oklahoma. I know that's not exactly southwest, but in those areas. We saw a couple of years ago that Texas, nearly the whole state, just shut down for 2 weeks. People froze to death. And people were doing some silly things. I understand why they were doing it, but going out to their cars to stay warm, you got to worry about carbon monoxide. The tailpipe is being blocked by snow. You can accumulate carbon monoxide. And then people were like in their homes and using candles and tents and different things. And all that's great, but they had to ignore all the safety stuff. And so people just died from safety problems and freezing to death. They say more people die in winter from the elements than they do in the summertime. And I believe that. I think wintertime is just tougher. I would expect that a lot of people are going to have to be prepared. I know that a lot of people just don't have the mindset. A lot of people say, Rob, you're just crazy living in a little tiny house off-grid. That's just nuts. Any sane person would live normal. Well, I'm here to tell you, any sane person would live the way I'm living. Because you just can't rely on anything anymore. The government, utilities, none of it. Gas prices, diesel's running out all over the country. But that's not why I do it. But I tell you, it sure is nice not having to be scared all the time. So what are you going to do if the power shuts off on you in the middle of winter and it's 20 degrees outside, 19 degrees outside? Well, it's happened to me before, and I made a lot of mistakes. We had this blizzard, kind of like blizzard, and the power shut down. It was 19 degrees, and I had this little generator. I mean, it was little. I think it produced 1,000 watts. It wasn't much. So I had a kerosene heater, and I had that little generator. So what I did was put the kerosene heater in the kitchen. Now the kerosene heater, you've probably seen these things at different hardware stores. I don't know, they sit about this high, and they're cylinder shape. Got a little tray down at the bottom, catches the kerosene if you spill it. It's got a little gas gauge on it. And so we use that to keep the kitchen warm because we didn't want the pipes freezing. But in the living room, we had this little space heater, and I ran the space heater off the generator at 750 watts because it wasn't going to power the 1500 watts on high, so it was like medium that we ran it on. And it didn't work. I don't know why I didn't turn the faucet on to let it drip and bring the kerosene heater into the living room, or we all camp out in the kitchen. The first thing you're going to want to do is get yourself a carbon monoxide detector. We have two. We got one on this wall and one on this wall. This never went off here, obviously, because we run this wood stove. It's all tight, pretty sealed up. We just don't have any problems with it. But if you're going to run a kerosene heater or propane heater, you're going to want one. Now, if you use a Mr. Heater portable buddy, I keep hearing people say use one of those. They're great. I've always liked them since I've seen them. They're great, but it barely keeps this 200 square foot house warm. I think that's all it can heat is 200, 250 square feet, something like that. So it's maxed out. And we did it in late spring. We used it in late spring when the temperatures were like in the 30s and the 40s, 50s, just to knock off the temperature. If you're having to use one of those when it's 10 degrees outside, it probably won't keep up. Now, what I'm getting ready to tell you is probably horribly unsafe, but I'd rather you take the safety precautions while you're being unsafe. Here is an option. Get yourself a big tent that you can sprawl out in your living room and put blankets over it. Lots of blankets. And then you can take your little buddy heater and take it into that tent. They're kind of designed for this thing, you know, being intense. We used it in a pop-up camper. We traveled as nomads. We used it in a pop-up camper all the time. And it worked great. If you brought your carbon monoxide detector in there, that's an added safety feature. But the nice thing about the buddy heater is it has an oxygen sensor. So if the oxygen depletes, it will shut off. It doesn't have a CO sensor. But the thing is, as your oxygen depletes, your CO goes up. Then you have the carbon monoxide detectors, and if they go off, then you know you need to get out of the tent. No big deal. Now, the thing about the buddy heater is it's a manual operation. It doesn't have a thermostat on it, so you got to turn it on, shut it off, turn it on, shut it off. In here, I would turn it on, let it run for an hour, and then shut it off. And the propane was lasting about a week and a half for a 20-pound tank, one of those barbecue tanks. You can buy a hose adapter for it. So they work pretty good. But again, the temperatures weren't that cold. I would use it if I had to in here as a backup. If something happened to the wood stove, I can't imagine what would happen. But I could use it, but we would have to maybe hang sheets so we didn't have to heat so much of the house. Then the other one is kerosene, but the kerosene is really expensive. I heard like $6 a gallon. But if you're just using it as a backup, it's a really good option. I like those kerosene heaters. So if you can click this up next box, take the video I was talking about the wood stove. So I hope I can inspire you to get ready for a cold winter without electric, so you can live your dreams. Thanks for watching.